All right, welcome to another free tutorial Friday. So this week I decided to open up this thing. I recorded it and just now laying back the audio on this Friday. And what I did is I took this grayscale sketch. It was originally just a sketch on vellum with markers and chalk. And I had refined it a little bit, not that much, still very loose, but in grayscale in Photoshop. And now I'm going to take that grayscale sketch and I'm going to colorize it, and we're going to end up with a finished color illustration. Even though this is still quite loose, you'll see how it tightens up, and I'll take you through all the steps in colorizing and in I'm going to do a little weathering pass as well at the end. So here I'm just reevaluating my background a bit and changing the contrast and putting a little hotspot over there on the wall or way in the environment behind my object, and that's really so I can get that nice reflection on the windshield. This windshield has a little break in it along the center line, and so I need a little bright spot over there to give me a little bright value to reflect on the far side of the window. And you can see I already have it there in my original sketch because it was just white over there before, and now or maybe, sorry, it was light gray, but anyway, I needed to get that back to being light gray. So those are all my layers set up. And now I'm going to start compressing and flattening everything. So I'm merging some layers together to make my colorizing simpler. So I'm deciding what do I need to keep on separate layers for colorizing later, and what can I merge. So I just merged all the layers I had that I used for sketching my vehicle for refining it. So now I've got it almost into one layer. Got that color dodge layer across the top there. And so I'm going to simplify, and now I can start to colorize. The color dodge can stay on top because it will affect the color just fine. So I'm going back to the background first, and I'm going to set this into basically like an orange environment with an orange car. So it's going to be kind of monochromatic. I did a much more colorful version of this you can find on my Facebook page for some friends down in Brazil, and I did it sort of in the Brazilian colors that went very yellow and green. But for now, we're just going to go orange, and then we're going to introduce a little color shift, but not that much. Keep it fairly subtle. So now I'm going around and I'm colorizing. And if you hold down the Option key and you hit like Option Command or Alt Command U, you can colorize to the same settings you did on the previous step. So you can still keep your layers separate, but you can get the same colorizing slider positions exactly by holding Option or Alt before that Command whatever key, Command L, Command U, Command B. You can go to the previously set slider positions. So that's a nice way to keep your layers independent, but still get all the color shifting to be exactly the same. And so I'm just going through and colorizing everything, making some tweaks, playing with the color of my shadows here, or now my midtones. But so with color balance, Command B, you can play with the color of shadows, midtones, and highlights independently, and it's a nice way to get some temperature change, not only temperature but color shifting within one value scale or value range. So what's nice about that, and I just add a little warming filter across the whole thing just to play and see if I want to harmonize all of it a bit. Ultimately, I think I ditch that. So the color balance I use a lot to get more color variation in one grayscale layer. So because you can change, like I'm doing again here, I'm doing it now to the background, so I can take the highlights and I could shift them right to this more blue color, and it's basically shifting the colors only based on value. So wherever it's the lightest third of that background image or layer, it would adjust that. In that case, it was just that hotspot that I changed. But you could do it all within one layer, like I could do it with the whole car body. I'm going to add a little reflection on the ground plane. Just a really quick cheat. Probably fix the perspective a little, but not much, because I'm going to blur it out quite a bit. So it's kind of like it's in this strange indoor, maybe it's this huge hangar thing, and on the lighting, the color's all coming from lighting. Or it's a little photo alcove when it's got a semi-gloss floor. So I'm adding a little bit more of the view of the bottom of the car. But I'm pretty much a cheat, this reflection, so not that technically accurate. And I'll go back in and try to fix it up a little bit. If you wanted to make it more accurate, of course, you would separate those elements, the near side wheels from the far side wheels, flip those on themselves independently, and then you'd only get the near side part of the car, then you have to draw more of the width, because we'd see more of the bottom of the car in the reflection. And you saw I added a little, but not much. Here's a very, very long lens, and here I'm going to blur it. And I'm going to add a little layer mask to add a little Fresnel effect for the floor. And I'm going to adjust my gradation there. So I'm adjusting the layer mask. And now I'm adjusting the opacity of the entire layer. Just want a soft little reflection there, just to add a little visual interest to the rendering. All right, now trying to do that little hot spot on the floor was a little too much. So just pushing that back on the background. Didn't want it to be that hot. More reflective than matte surface, so I'll get rid of that old hotspot that I had before. All right, now I've got a layer on top, and I've set it to color on top of my hot rod layer. And you can see I'm now picking the background color, right, with a regular airbrush. And I'm picking the background where those colors would reflect across the surface. And I'm not going to do a lot of reflections on this. It's literally just trying to integrate it to its background. So it's not like a full reflection study at all. So here I am colorizing. And so it helps to get some of the, you could leave it all kind of like it was, monochromatic, kind of orange shifted grayscale sketch, right? But in this case, I'm trying to now get more interesting color variations. So I really just want the body of the vehicle to be orange, and I want the other elements to be more neutral. So I'm just glazing over that, all on my color layer, and I'm color shifting, right, the layer below. So I turned on I made it a clipping path by holding down Alt or Option when you cross over your cursor between those two layers, my color shifting layer on top and my hot rod layer below. And now I want to start to get some of the orange out. And you can leave some of it, right, because it's going to be a loose sketch in the end. So this is a really fast way. I think the entire process, even though I was trying to record it and do it nicely with all the layer organization and stuff, that ran about 40 minutes, I think, to take. And I'm going to do a weathering pass, which was definitely half of it. You'll see that starting here in a few minutes. So pushing around, right, colorizing, and I want my tires to be more neutral, not so warm. So now I'm using just a straight color brush instead of doing a colorized layer on top. Now back to my color shifting layer. So, and that's because my tire was on my sketch below. It wasn't, that was just the rim up top. So you could either use an airbrush set to color mode in the upper left, or you can use a normal brush painting on a color layer. You get the same effect. It doesn't change value, it only changes color. So you can start to see now I'm separating out the body is now starting to look like orange paint, even though it's in an orange environment. And I'm not going to really, I'm going to kind of ignore the wheels on this one. It's really just meant to be a quick demo on basic colorizing techniques. And here I'm going to blur my shadow a bit. I have a soft overhead light box in this case, so that shadow should be softer, blurrier. So it's a bit harsh. So, and now softening it back. Colorized it a little bit to more of that greenish blue color that's behind the car. Okay, now tweaking the placement of that little hotspot on the wall. So it's almost done with the colorizing actually. I think all total this was probably close to about 20 minutes. Still got to colorize parts of my little sci-fi engine. So what I'm doing here is just on a normal, let's see what's that, a normal layer looks like. I just painted in that color from the background with an airbrush. And I wanted there's like a little flat serrated, a bunch of little flat oval shapes on the front of that sci-fi engine. And so I just wanted those to reflect through that hole to the background. So I just picked the background color, threw it on there with an airbrush, and now I'm just erasing back out. So trying to get that surface to be the color of the background. It's not really a demo on how to do reflective surfaces, but it's just really a little quick example of how you can get a surface to relate a little bit more to its background. and then I'll just continue colorizing. And then I want to go in and do a little weathering pass on this. So all in all, looks pretty good. Squint your eyes. You know, you can, this color thing, when people colorize, they tend to just think about it too literal and not really, spend time doing color variation. So what I mean by that is that, just because you colorize in grayscale, you can have any colors you want. If your values are already working, they're going to stay the same. And typically, you might have pushed the values too light in certain areas, which is commonly the case when you do a grayscale rendering. And then you have a hard time trying to get a good saturated color. And it's because it's going to turn out to be too pastel, right? So if you have a red car and you've pushed it to white in areas, the only thing you're going to get is pink when you try to colorize it. So if you want to have a nice saturated color in the light, you need to have a dark enough value. Like a good saturated yellow is actually about a 4 or 5 in value in its brightest area. So keep that in mind. And here I isolated the visor up top, and I'm going to clean up this line with a path. So if I was making a tight rendering, this is the sort of thing I would do to clean up that. All right, so I just made a selection, then I erased. We could have made the selection and deleted either way, but that's the way you go in and start to clean up lines, is using paths. I'm not really going to do that much on this rendering. In fact, that might have been it for the path work. So more color tweaking. Now I'm tweaking that logo, that decal on the side of the vehicle. Trying to decide how I want to tweak it. Do I want it to stay warm? Do I want it to go cool? Ultimately stayed pretty neutral. And that's basically it for the colorizing pass. So next, I'm going to show you some weatherizing techniques that I like to do. And I'm also going to bring some more texture into this rendering in general. So I grabbed 2 photos that I've taken of walls out in my neighborhood, and I want to float them across the top. And this is similar to the techniques I used in that quadruped rendering that I did a while back, that tutorial. I just float some texture over the top and probably set it to overlay. And the thing was, the original sketch was really scruffy and textural, and I liked that, so I wanted to keep that. So I'm trying to harmonize everything back together with a little texture floating over the top. So I just put that orange texture over the top, put it on overlay, and I'm going to throw this one on top and see if there's a spot for that. Not sure there will be, but let's give it a try. And just experiment, see what happens if I put that on overlay. It's kind of starting to look like it's painted on a piece of wood or something, which is not a bad look. And I'd like to cycle through all the different compositing methods and just see if there's something that's better, the happy accident style. And so change your compositing and mix those together and see what you get. So from overlay to exclusion to difference to darken, try all those different settings and see what you like. And try one on, try one off, change their opacities. So that's all I'm doing here. So now I'm going to take my color layers. I've committed them to that hot rod layer now. So everything's now on one layer, all the paint. I'm happy with the color shifting. And now I'm going to double it up and just see about changing it. So I like to do this. There's my grayscale. Still has a little bit of color. Changing the contrast. So what I'm doing is I'm getting ready to set up my weathering pass. So what I'm doing there is I copied my base layer and I shifted it to reflect what I wanted, like a neutral shiny metal to look like. Not that it's that accurate that it's shiny, but I'm saying underneath the orange paint is this light gray material. And it could be light gray primer, it could be metal. And all I do then is turn on a layer mask and start painting in my chipped paint. And so I go around with a hard edge brush and chip up the paint at door seams and little radiuses and sharp edges that would get rubbed off through years of wear. And that's all on a layer mask. And because it's floating on top, and the only part of the light gray layer, because I turned down the saturation, and then I adjusted the levels so that it would give me a brighter layer underneath. And you only reveal that using the layer mask. And so it's really easy to go in and scratch up, and basically I'm just weathering, I'm chipping off and scratching off the paint. That's what it starts to look like. But what's cool about it is you're not destroying your original file, the orange one underneath, And so I can turn on and off this effect. So it's easy to make two versions. Say, when it came out of the showroom and it was newer, and then after years of wear and abuse, what might it look like? And I'm not going to go in and do a super technical, finished version of this. It's really meant to be, educational, showing you the steps in a short form method in some sort of tutorial that doesn't last too long. And here I am just chipping up those open areas. And that'd be very common. Like if you're in there working on the motor, right, those things might get banged, and those are high stress areas, those little radiuses and things. And so those are common areas that would get beaten up and paint would chip off of. Also leading edges, right, as this thing's driving over the years, little stones get kicked up from cars in front and would scrape up the bottom side and kick up and hit parts of the vehicle. And so I'm scraping off a lot of the paint on the underbody. And that little radius there. Yeah, and some of those edges might have got nicked by tools while working on the motor. Put up and down the window a lot, and maybe stick your arm out and rub off some of those areas. So just using sort of common sense to think about where are the high wear zones for this paint. Okay, and now I made a selection of my layer mask, and that's what it looks like for all the mask. And now I'm going to shift it. So what I did was I just hit Command and it clicked inside my layer mask to make a selection. Right, and then I pulled that off of my orange layer using that selection, made a new layer above, and now I'm just shifting the colors and the levels, and I'm making this like dark primer ruddy brown color. Okay, and I'm going to put it on top of my base metal layer. Let's call it like the base metal, and let's call the red one the primer one. So you'll see I now have a new layer mask added to that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to now modify that, and what I'm going to end up with is a layer in between. I'm just trying to pick a slightly textured brush now. And some areas it's going to stay with that sort of reddish primer brown, right? Reddish brown and Tuscan red kind of color. And in other areas it's going to get all the way through. The chipping and the wear is going to get all the way through to the base gray underneath. And so again, I'm using a layer mask, and I've just copied the selection of where all the paint chips are, right, from the first layer mask. And then I just color and value shifted that. And I just went back in and repainted those. You can just paint black and white into that layer mask to refine areas of that and keep it, right? Keep the primer, the red, or just by painting black and white, you can vary that. So you very, very quickly, you get a really interesting and much more sophisticated look than should you just paint these from scratch. And I think it's much faster. And what I like a lot is it doesn't destroy your original rendering. So you can see now I've got the base metal starting to show through, and I've got that intermediate layer. So it's giving thickness to the paint, but it's also shifting the color. And what's cool about it, if you didn't like that reddish brown as your primer, right, and you want to shift it to another color, it's on a separate layer. So you have full color and value control over that primer color and of the base metal. So that's pretty fun. So there I'm just going around. So it's a little second pass, and I'm varying it a little bit from the first pass. I don't want it to be identical. So you make some chips stronger than others. And down through the bottom there, I'm going to probably use a nice textured brush. And you see how quickly you can generate a pretty cool weathered surface. Just doing your own, freehand painting, not even dropping on textures, photographic textures or anything for that, just creating it on my own and free painting it. So we're almost done. Looks like we've got about, I'm going to say 3 minutes left. And here I'm scratching off the number a bit, so that decal needs some wear. So I just threw a layer mask on top of that. Again, you can turn it on and off as opposed to truly erasing it. I'm just hiding it with the layer mask. And looks like we're almost there. And just changing the opacity a bit so it integrates a little more with the paint underneath. It's definitely worn off and thin. All right, and that's it. Quick tutorial on colorizing a grayscale sketch and doing a little weathering pass using independent layers with layer masks and using color balance and levels to adjust those different layers for your base metal and your primer. And then I'm adding a little bit of texture just to stylize this and keep it loose and textural as an illustration. So I hope you liked it, and tune in again next Friday and see what I post. Have a great week.